because of that, we're going to learn it and prepare the papers, and they ran away. Let me see. They gotta be here somewhere. Someone could do me a favor and pass it around. A very small minor. Hardly ever would you find such small minor of Likutei Torah. In fact, I don't think there is another minor this size. The minor is called Vehadarta Pnei Zaken. And we're going to learn this and then go back to a regular mimer. It's a short mimer. The reason why I'm saying it's an extraordinary mimer is that the Frierdiker Rebbe said that he heard from his father that this mimer, Likutei Torah has many, many mimerim, and a lot of them we know when the Alter Rebbe said it, what year, under what circumstances, what holiday. Some things we don't know. And this mimer, Rebbe Rashab told the Frierdiker Rebbe that the Alter Rebbe said it shortly after the Mezritcher Magid was nostalgic. The mimer talks about the advantage of learning Torah by heart and words of Torah being engraved in the person's mind and the person's heart. So apparently, he said this after the Magid's passing, meaning that after the Magid's passing, you want to remember everything that you saw, everything that you heard, remember all his teachings. So learning this mimer is something which helps a person internalize this in a permanent way that it stays with you forever. And then he said that the Tzemach Tzedek, before his passing, also said this mimer. And the Rebbe Maharaj, before his passing, said this mimer. And then the Frierdiker Rebbe concludes that his own father, the Rebbe Rashab, the year of his passing, he spoke of the mimer numerous times. And that was all for this purpose. In fact, the Rebbe Rashab said about himself, whenever there was a time that there was an inyan in Chassidus or any Torah in general that he wanted to absorb it very deeply, he would learn this mimer. So this mimer helps absorb words of Torah in a very deep way. And in our Rebbe's letters, we find that people who wrote to the Rebbe that they are complaining that they don't have a good memory. So they study, they learn, but they can't retain the information. So the Rebbe tells them to learn this mimer by heart. Of course, you need memory to learn this mimer by heart. But it's a small mimer, so I guess if you really work hard to get this by heart, it'll help you remember other things as well. And then the Frierdiker Rebbe said something very powerful, that he heard from his father, the Rebbe Rashab. This is before the times that we had Fitas, when the Rebbe Rashab said this. He said that the Rebbes of Chabad had a Seder that every single day they would learn Tanya, every single day. And he said that learning Tanya and just saying the words of Tanya has in it the power to reveal in an internal way the naran, the nefesh, ruach, and neshama of a person. However, learning the Mamar Vehadarta Pnei Zaken in Likutei Torah, that opens a person up, that the light of Yechida will shine and penetrate in a deep, penetrating way. I'll be able to absorb that. So these are very unusual words. You don't find this about other things. The reason why these vowels, I put them in because some students wanted to learn the mimer by heart. If you want, there is a website that's called Learning Chassidus. They have dozens of mimarim that are translated into English there. And over there, it's also with vowels. So you might want to go there. It'll be a little bit better than the vowels that I wrote here. This is homemade, and those are typed, and so on. So let's learn the Maimer. What? Why I stop? I didn't stop. I'm going to continue. It's just that this is from this week's Parsha Kedoshim. That's why I'm learning it today. And after we finish this Maimer, we'll go back to our Maimer. In this Parsha, it has this pasuk, Vehadarta Pnei Zaken. You should honor the elderly. And the Gemara says it means, there's another pasuk which says you have to honor any person that's older in age. But here, the word Zaken means Zeh Shekana Chachma. Zaken means a person that acquired wisdom. In other words, a Torah scholar. But what is the precise wording of Kana? Because really, Kana means to acquire. It's a term that's used for acquisition in monetary issues. When you buy something, and here you're using that term in reference to learning. So the Rebbe says, when you buy something, it becomes yours. There's an object that wasn't yours before. When I pay for it, now it becomes mine. So I guess there's a way of learning Torah, and I learn it, and I read it, and I hear it, but it didn't become mine, which means I didn't really absorb it. Kana means it became mine. Commissioner Kosovo, it says, but those that grasp the Torah, the Hainu, Misha Tefes b'meicha zikaron, someone who is able to absorb the Torah and grasp it, and it's embedded in his memory, and it's engraved and etched in his heart forever. Like our sages say, who would be defined as a Torah scholar? That if he walks in the room, you have to stand up for him. You ask him a question in Torah and halacha, and he answers you without hesitation, which means the information is already and set in his head. And that's a sign of a Talmud Chacham. That means that he remembers and retains all that information. Yeah.
But how are we to know that he's remembering it correctly?
Well, we're talking about memorizing things verbatim.
I see. Okay, so if it's like verbatim.
Right, this Maimer, for example, the point would be to remember it verbatim. When you remember, verbatim means word for word, and if you know it word for word, it contains in it all the commentary, all the wisdom, all the depth that's there. But then it's mitzvah to stand up for this person. He's walking in the room, and he's not studying Torah right now. I understand if he's studying Torah, you have to respect him because of the Torah. But if he's not studying Torah, why do I stand up for him? And the answer is because HaKadosh Baruch Hu dwells and rests in him, even when he's engaged in worldly things, which means he's not learning Torah now, he's doing something else which is just mundane. And the reason is, being that the Torah is engraved in his memory, the memory of his neshama, and on his heart, and we know that Hashem and the Torah is one. So just as like a person walks in with the Torah scroll in the room, everybody stands up because the Torah just walked in. And what's Torah? Torah has Hashem's presence in it. So a person who has Torah written in his brain, what's the difference if it's written on parchment or it's written in my brain? I have the Torah in my head, and now I walk in the room, and in the Torah is Hashem's presence. So you have to stand up for Hashem's presence. And therefore, called Ishnilva, every person, which is sort of, his heart fails to connect to Hashem. He wants to give his heart, and his soul expires. He wants to be connected to Hashem constantly. He wants Hashem to be dwelling within him constantly and permanently. without any interruption. Afilu regecha, not even once. How's that possible? Here you're doing a mitzvah. Here you're learning Torah. But where you're doing personal things, not mitzvahs, not Torah, and how could you have Hashem's presence? How could you be guaranteed that Hashem's presence is within you on a split second interruption? So the answer is, he should acquire Torah in his memory, remember words of Torah by heart, and then even if he's occupied with the bodily things, physical things, personal things, the Torah is there, but it's hidden. It's in a hidden place of the soul. And in this hidden place of the soul, we know that the Hashem's name has 4 letters, Yud, K, Vav, K. The 4 letters correspond to the spheres. So the Yud corresponds to Chokhmah, the Hey corresponds to Bina, the Vav corresponds to the 6 Midas, Chesed, Gvur, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and the last Hey corresponds to Malchus. So the Yud corresponds to Chokhmah, and Chokhmah is the part of the brain, the part of the soul that contains all the information subconsciously. That's the part of the brain that has things in an unconscious, subconscious way. And that's why it's connected to the Yud. Shalochem b'Parshas Kadosh Liko B'chor, and that's why in the Parsha of Kadosh Liko B'chor, it says, Ulizikorim bein anecha k'neidem. There are also 4 Parshas that we put into the Tefillin. One Parsha begins with the words Kadosh Liko B'chor. Second Parsha begins with the words Vayir Kiviyacha. The third Parsha is Shema Yisrael. And the fourth Parsha is V'hayim Shemayim. So we're saying that in the first Parsha, which is Kaddish, and that corresponds to the Yud, it says, Ulizikorim bein anecha. You should remember it. And why is it there? Because these 4 Parshas also correspond to the 4 letters of Hashem's name. And the first Parsha corresponds to the Yud. And the Yud is Chokhmah. And that's the unconscious part of the brain. So therefore, it's connected to memory. That's where memory is. In other words, when you know something by heart, it's inside you. I don't see it. I don't feel it. I'm not thinking about it. But it's there in an absolute, true way, no different than the person who's thinking about it. So if I study something, I learn something in Torah, and I have it written in my memory, it's in my head. In fact, there's a mimer from the Alter Rebbe, where the Alter Rebbe uses this as an analogy to explain when we say that Hashem's presence is somewhere behelim. Like, what is the difference between Hashem's presence in the street, or Hashem's presence in the shul, or Hashem's presence in the Beis HaMikdash? So the answer is that in the Beis HaMikdash, Hashem's presence is revealed. In the street, Hashem is there. There's not a place in the world where he's not found, but it's concealed. So the Alter Rebbe, to give a mashal, to be able to understand what does it mean, it's there, but it's concealed, uses this mashal. You learn something by heart, you know it inside out, backwards, forwards, not always, but sometimes. And you're not even thinking about it, but it's there fully, just like the person that's thinking about it. It's just not in your conscious mind, but in the subconscious, it's there. I actually once heard from my grandfather that, I think he heard this from a person, or a person who heard it from the person that spoke to one of the Chassidim of the Tzemach Tzedek. His name was a Teres Chesed, very big Chassid. A Chassid who had vast knowledge of Nigla, Chassidus. He was a Rav, one of the biggest in his times. And he was known to know the Torah by heart, not only by heart, that he could also give it to you backwards. So he approached him once and said, I want to understand. I know Ashrei by heart. I say it 3 times a day. I'm saying it for so many years. If someone tells me to say Ashrei backwards, I would stumble over the words, crack my teeth. How do you do it? So he said to him, if the Siddur would be open, could you read it backwards? Yeah, the Siddur is open and just read the words backwards. Also not so simple, but you can do it. So he said, Baruch Hashem, Hashem granted me this gift. But whatever I learn, I see it in front of me like an open siddur, so I can read it back. So a person like that, he learns the Torah he studies is in his head. Yeah. How do you get there? I don't know. I can't tell you.
No. I'm still trying to learn how to read it.
Yeah.
I'll get to that. Was there any significance to knowing how to read it backwards, or just something he found out he could do?
Yeah, I don't think he worked on reading backwards. Like you said, when the siddur is open, in other words, he had a phenomenal memory, what we call today probably photographic memory. And unfortunately, there are people who have it, but they use it for nonsense. He uses it for Torah study. I remember there was a guy who came to 770. He was a little not so balanced, but he had a photographic memory. And literally, he tell you, take a page in the telephone book and just read names and numbers. I'll read it back to you. That's what he did. You take 50 names, you read this is the name, this is the number, name, the number. And without looking, he just repeated it back. That's called a photographic memory. So when you have that kind of memory in terms of Torah study, it's phenomenal. But that's a gift. I don't know if a person could work on that, right? You have to have a camera inside, copy machine. And this explains also the reason when it says in halacha, in the laws of Torah study, it's a mitzvah for every person to know the entire Torah. What does that mean? Torah is infinite. It means every person should learn and know all the 613 mitzvahs, which is in fact one of the things the Rebbe instituted to learn the Rambam, which gives you all the mitzvahs. What is the advantage specifically of that? Because when you learn Torah, you have Hashem's presence in you, but when you go ahead and you make it even more detailed, like you're learning the 613 mitzvahs, by doing that, you draw down the light of Hashem on you, but not just in general, but also in every detail. There's 613 parts to the soul, and there's 613 mitzvahs. Every mitzvah has a certain counterpart in the neshama. So when you learn those mitzvahs in Torah, so that part of Torah brings Hashem's presence on my eyes, on my ears, on my head, on my heart, on my hands, on my legs, and so on. So I want that every part of me, because we love Hashem, we want that every fiber of our being should be connected to Him. And that's the way to do it. Like it says, Kulach yofer hayosi umum ein bach. Hashem says, you're beautiful in a very complete way. You have no blemish whatsoever. Kulach daika, all of you. In other words, it's not that I'm generally connected to Hashem. I'm more or less connected to Hashem, and that's fine. But the real goal should be that every part of me is connected to Hashem, and these are the 613 mitzvahs. I mean, there's a general question that's asked, and that is, but there's certain mitzvahs that not everybody does. There's mitzvahs that Kohanim do. A lot of mitzvahs of the 613 is exclusively for a Kohen in the Beis HaMikdash. A lot of mitzvahs are for the Leviim. A lot of mitzvahs pertain to a king. Then there are mitzvahs pertain to men, not to women. So how could every one of the 613 mitzvahs have Hashem's light in me? Anyone know the answer? So the Alter Rebbe says that when the Torah says, for example, that a king should do these mitzvahs, being that he's the king, and only he's obligated, so by him doing the mitzvahs, it's like the head and the body, that if the king does it, then from him, it flows to every single person in the world. Every yid in the world gets it from him because he's the head. And what if it's Kohanim? The same thing. Being that they designated these people as Kohanim, and they represent the whole Jewish nation, so those mitzvahs that they do as Kohanim, from them it flows to that part of the soul or body that's related to their mitzvahs for all other Jews. And the same with men and women, and the same with any other mitzvah that applies only to certain people in certain positions. And all this comes from a source up there that's also consists of 613. It's called Adam. We just had that in the Adam Mimer, that there's a level in the spiritual realm that's called Adam, which means it has the same structure as the Adam down here. And what's that structure? That it consists of 613 different levels. In fact, if you remember, Masilagani explains, because Hashem has these 613 aspects. The Neshama has 613 aspects, and Hashem wants us to be connected to Him. Every one of our 613 should be connected to every one of His 613. So He gave us 613 bridges, and those are the 613 mitzvahs. Or the marshal used of a rope. Each mitzvah makes a connection between one part of my neshama and Hashem, and also the body has 613 parts. Okay, this is the way it's supposed to be. By the way, even in our generation, there's some people, I wouldn't say there are many of them, but some people that have that gift and they have phenomenal knowledge of Torah. There was a Rosh Yeshiva that would teach in 770 that was like that. There was a Rosh Yeshiva in Montreal. His name was Rabbi Hirschprung. Also was known for his phenomenal memory. But I remember one incident that once happened. It was really fascinating to watch. He was sort of playing with it. A group of us traveled to Montreal to attend the wedding of a friend. So of course, when Bachram come, where are you going to go? You go to the yeshiva. Whoever comes to the yeshiva walks over to him and gives him Shalom Aleichem. He's the Rosh Yeshiva. Takes your hand, Shalom Aleichem. His first question is, so what are you learning? He would say, I'm learning the tractate of Rosh Hashanah. What page? Page 20. He started rattling off word for word, verbatim, what it says on page 20. Shalom Aleichem, what are you learning? Sefta Shabbos. What page? Page 100. Started rattling off verbatim what it says in there. I mean, it's an incredible gift to have the whole Torah on your head like that. But here goes the part that relates more to us. Because of the difficult times we live in, it's a time of galus, there's so much going on that doesn't allow us to be able to study and concentrate the way people used to do. The times of the Beis Hamikdash when there was godliness shining in the world, the lack of our intelligence, the depth of the knowledge of Torah, all this together makes it so difficult that we can't do what it says here. So the Alter Rebbe says, do something which is minimal. Al Kaponim, the Parshas, make an effort, to engrave and edge into your mind and your heart. Not a lot, just Chamisha Chumsha Torah, the 5 Chumoshim. Teres Moshe Shem Kosav Piagur. Just do that by heart. That's all. Breishes Shmois Vayikra Bamidbar Dvarim, and that's pretty good. Why? Same idea. And this is a very, very basic principle in Torah that if you have the head, you have all the details. The Torah Shebuksav is the head that includes the whole entire Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu wrote this. This is the root of the entire written Torah and the entire oral Torah. K'nayda, as it's known, it says in Gemara, Rabbi Akiva hayederish al kol kaitz v'kaitz tilim shel halachas. Rabbi Akiva went ahead and he explained even the kaitz, the little lines on top of the letters, that they're also teaching us something. And he taught tilish, mountains and mountains of halachas just from those little things on top, which means every word in Torah, every letter in Torah, every line on top of the letters, they'll all teach us something, which means everything written in the 60 volumes of the Shas, and everything written in all the volumes of the oral Torah that explain the Shas, all the commentary, it all is included in the Chumash. So in a sense, if you know the Chumash, then you know the whole Torah. If it's written in your head, like memorize it, then you have the whole Torah in your head. So the Chumash is like Alma Diskasi, that's the hidden a hidden world because everything is hidden there. The oral Torah is where things come out more revealed. So this is what you'll learn from the hidden part of the Torah. What do we do from the other part? Ma'amad is Galia, Tereshim Alpeh. Al Kapanim Lepachas, at least Yikne V'Yachik say the Kachim. You know, the Mishnayos has 6 volumes. 6 volumes. And one of them is called Kachim, which means all the Mishnahs and all the halachas that pertain to sacrifices and things in the Beis HaMikdash. So just learn that by heart.
Rabbi?
Few lifetimes, yeah.
Isn't there a halakha or something else to memorize the written Torah? That's why it's written?
The halacha is not to say it by heart. You have to read it from inside, but I could memorize it in my head. In other words, I should know the information, but I'm not allowed to pronounce it verbally by heart. Only read it from inside. Why Kachim? Why that part? Because it's called Chochmah B'Divrei Razal, and we just finished saying that Chochmah is the part of the brain that contains the information in unconscious level. And another thing is Mechaper V'Neisiv Shalodam. It atones a person's sins. The Arizal says when you learn Masechta Kachim, I guess it's about Karbonis, and the sacrifice in general was an atonement. So when you learn about the sacrifice and you have it in your head, that's an atonement. There's a very beautiful sikh from the Rebbe. The Rebbe once explained, how does atonement come into this mimer? Who's talking about atonement? We're talking about memorizing to have the knowledge of Torah. So the Rebbe explains the pasuk that the Rebbe brought before, where it says, "Kulach yofer hayosi," you're all beautiful, you have no blemish. Okay, it's the same question. Why does it say there's no blemish? Just say if you're saying that the person's relationship with Hashem is complete and it's all kulach, then you don't have to say there's no blemish. Obviously, there's no blemish. So I've explained, no, there's 2 things. Number 1, I do mitzvahs to draw down Hashem's presence upon me. And that means kulach, I have Hashem's presence everywhere in all 16, 13 aspects of my soul. But then, if a person chas v'shalom does an aveira, that blocks it. That's a blemish. So therefore, it says both things. Number 1, I draw down all the 613 mitzvahs, and number 2, there is no blemish, and then it's perfect. So at the end, he says the same thing. Learn Masechta Kachim. First of all, this draws down Hashem's Chochmah, which therefore you have all the knowledge of Torah in a hidden way. And the second thing is, it also is a atonement for sin. So therefore, there's no blemish, there's nothing negative that's going to interfere and block it. So I actually heard that there was someone who complained to the Rebbe about memory. And like I said, the Rebbe's answer to people was memorize this by heart, and that'll help you retain your information. But it seems, being that it says that to learn the tractate of Kachim, which is a big tractate, has all the Mishnahs pertaining to sacrifices. The Rebbe told someone, at least learn 1 chapter from the entire tractate by heart. And why don't you choose a chapter that's in the Siddur, which we say every day? In the Siddur, before we do Hodu, I don't know, women don't have to say it, but there's a chapter that starts with the word Ezel Mekayim Shel Zvachim, which is laws about sacrifices. And it's from the tractate of Kachim. So it comes out that if you know something in Kachim by heart, to some degree, it has the same advantage as if you know the whole thing by heart. So therefore, anything a person learns by heart, we know that the Rebbe instituted that even children should learn those psukim by heart, quotes from the Chazal by heart, which is obviously connected to this. A child has in his head by heart, that means it's engraved in his heart. Shema Yisrael, Torah Tziva Lanu, and all these amazing parts of Torah in his head. Subconsciously, it has an effect on the child, even when he grows up. While we're on the subject, it's an interesting thing to note. Why did our sages choose this chapter of Kachim to be there in the Siddur by davening? There's hundreds of chapters, not dozens, but hundreds of chapters. Why did they choose this chapter? There must be something unique about this chapter. And I'm sure there are many reasons, but one of the reasons the Rebbe would mention often is there's something in this chapter that's not found anywhere in the entire Shas, I think. And that is, it's a Mishnah, it's a whole chapter that is not one disagreement in the Mishnah. Normally, you read a Mishnah, Rabbi Meir says this, Rabbi Yehuda says that. One says this, the other says that. Shammai says this, Beis Hillel says that. If you look through these Mishnahs, you'll see there's not one Mishnah that has two opinions. It's all one. So that's a good part for davening. Okay, this is it. And this is if you want to go online and find this mimer with the English translation, with the vowels. It's called Learn Chassidus.com. The computer is amazing. It's a good memory. Whatever you put in there,